I've had conversations with both of you, and I've really appreciated what you had to say in how you run your companies and how you reacted to the start of the pandemic. But what I wanted to do as a starting point is to have both you, Tom, and Tyrone talk a little bit about what does your company do, and then what is the vision that you have for your company? What are the values that you have, and why is that so critical to the business model that you have? So, Tom, I'm going to start with you for this question, and then we'll go to you, Tyrone.
For sure.
Byron, thank you and good morning. And again, I just do want to echo it. It is an extreme pleasure to be here. So thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, just briefly, CAI, what we are is we're a technology company. And in a nutshell, we are working with clients typically in the Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 to help them leverage technology in some capacity. And sometimes that's very tactical in the sense that we're helping them use technology to automate or drive efficiencies. And it's about blocking and tackling and how that can be done better through the use of technology. But in addition, as we all know, the importance of technology and the rate of change and how business models are changing, the other aspects of our business are not as much tactical, but they're very strategic. How do companies utilize technology in order to achieve competitive advantage or maintain market share, et cetera? So we primarily are a software business. We help write and implement software and leverage technology in all forms, from robotics to how do you make more effective software and business processes, et cetera. So we work across that spectrum, but the elements that I just described to you really are our what. And what I mean by that is technology is changing, and the pace of change, we're all familiar. We don't need to expound upon that. But CAI's what changes almost by the month, and certainly what we do today is far different than what we did a year ago, 6 years ago, as business and technology is changing. And that's all very important to us. But if I look at the fabric of our business and what we really try and do, we really try and focus on our why. And our why, we really translate into our purpose. We strive to be a purpose-driven organization. And from our inception, we are privately held, which comes with certain advantages with respect to some of the decisions we can make, and very much taking a long-term perspective to shareholder value, to how do you enable an outstanding culture to your employees, as well as how do you do the right things for your clients. And with that purpose, we've always viewed CAI as an engine to give back, an engine that we can serve our purpose in the community, which is to help underserved and disadvantaged youth and families in the communities that we're involved in. And that really is our why. That's our purpose, our guiding principles, all tied back to aspects of that. And that really is that's our compass. That's we like to use the term commander's intent. And commander's intent speaks to the fact that while you can have a very detailed business plan and set of objectives that you're trying to accomplish, when you're in the throes of day-to-day on projects and hard decisions, et cetera, we want our leaders and our employees to go back to that commander's intent. When in doubt, what a commander's intent states is, first and foremost, we're going to remain true to our purpose, remain true to giving back to our communities. We're going to try and ensure that we create a culture that our employees are able to grow personally and professionally. And we're always going to do what's right for our clients over the long term. We will always look at it from that perspective, even if that means sacrificing short-term profits or short-term advantage in order to gain long-term perspective and what's right for our clients. So that's just a bit, Byron, of an overview of who we are and what we do. And again, at our core, at our tenet is we pride ourselves on trying to be a purpose-driven organization. And certainly, as I'm sure we'll chat this morning, that was very helpful, and that was a guiding principle as we worked through the challenges of the last 12, 13 months.
Well, Tom, let me ask you kind of a lead-on question from that. You've got a lot of people in your organization, and you're bringing new people in. You've got a management team. It's one thing for you to believe that, and maybe a few of your key executives to believe that. How do you make sure that that actually gets ingrained, not only from a knowledge place, but also from the overall DNA in your company, that people actually believe and own it and embrace it?
Sure, and that's a great question. Certainly when you look at culture and you look at principles. It's important that that becomes part of your day-to-day, it becomes part of your communication, it becomes part of your branding. Honestly, as I reflect back on our business, maybe 6, 5, 10 years ago, the things that we did that spoke to purpose, we did very quietly. Because to be honest with you, we kind of felt like it was almost boastful in the sense that we didn't want to tell what we were doing to support Easter Seals, or the Boys and Girls Clubs, were different inner city educational initiatives we were in support of. And there are so many companies that do so much as it relates to helping and giving back. But what we quickly discovered as we went through this is it was something that our people, the more they learned about it, they really aligned with it. And ultimately, Byron, it's become part of our branding that we speak about this. If you went out to our website, you would see we, as a purpose-driven organization, we use it as an asset when we're looking to attract the right people. And what we found was by promoting this and making this a part of our day-to-day and our culture and instilling it in our individuals from the very time they start to on board with us, if we're hiring a new employee, where we speak to what we're doing in the community and the different programs and so forth, we have made it part of our day-to-day. We've made it part of our brand and part of our culture. And it becomes a little bit of a chicken and the egg, in the sense that we found that we started to attract certain types of individuals and certain type of employees that resonated with. We had talked to new clients about that, and we attracted new clients that resonated with. It became a point of differentiation. So the essence of your question, Byron, as to how is you make it systemic. You make it almost reflexive, is the word we like to use. It's reflexive in the business. It's not something we think about. It's certainly not, you don't walk into our conference rooms and see our mottos framed, but it becomes just part of our day-to-day, how we communicate, how we highlight success. And what we prize as business success is tied much more to our why, or our purpose, than our what. Now, don't get me wrong, as a technology company, we have to stay current, and we have to make sure we're always looking to solve creative and interesting problems that our clients have. So that's very much as well. But the culture and the people side and and positioning is extremely important. Just very quickly, the other aspect that we did was purpose and give back often has a financial orientation. And certainly if we're not taking care of our clients and our employees, we don't have the financial means to be able to serve our purpose to give back. But money's only one side of it. So we very much have instituted programs that involve our employees, that they're hands-on with some of the communities and in the schools, and email buddy programs, and giving them opportunities to volunteer in the various different programs. So it becomes a part of who we all are. And it's not just a separate piece of the organization, but rather it's systemic, again, reflexive throughout our entire organization.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tom. Okay, Tyrone, now it's your turn to kind of share a little bit about you and Faces International.
Absolutely, and I want to thank you all for having me as well. It's been a wild and wonderful year over the past year, and just having more opportunities to engage with the public and let folks know what Faces does is something that we have welcomed. So thank you for inviting us out. Faces is a full service marketing and development firm, right? So everything from running of marketing campaigns, coming in and doing some consultation around your marketing, your visuals, so on and so forth. We do web design, graphic design, video design. We do all of that in-house, but we also do development, right? So when we say marketing and development, a lot of folks think that we're out to raise money, right? So you're doing development, so how are you fundraising? Right? But what we believe is, in the marketing space, folks haven't given enough energy to what it looks like to develop the people that are actually in charge of producing their product or servicing their organization. So in our development aspect, we do diversity education and team building work, because we believe no matter how beautiful the outside of your organization is, right? I think I was just referring to placards on the wall, right? And things like that. So we say no matter how beautiful your logos are, your website may be, that we design, if the people inside of your organization don't believe in the mission, and in some cases, many people don't know the mission of your organization, then how can you expect them to really service your new marketing and development plan, or your marketing plan that you're putting out to the public? So we always say you have to build those sound relationships internally, so that you can begin to really do or see the fruits of your hard work when you're coming up with your marketing. We think that's critical, right? We started this in 2012, before people fully understood the importance of your staff and and how they could literally destroy your organization if they didn't believe in the mission that you put forth, right? Because it's kind of popular to say that we care about our communities and we're engaged now. But when that's not happening on the inside, those folks will tell the true story on the outside. So that's something that we've been doing for so long. And just now in 2021, late 2020, people started to understand the importance of diversity education, taking it a step further beyond team building and cultural awareness and how people show up to the workspace and what it means for people to be in a place of abundance and health when they're showing up to work, right? So the vision that I've always had for Faces when we started the company is the same vision that I've always had for myself, which is really to align my life's work with my life, so that there is no separation of who I am and the work that I do. Right? I think we spend so much time at our workplaces, and even more as entrepreneurs or business owners, that I didn't want it to feel like I was living a double life. So when we look at Faces, that idea that a business should work as an ecosystem where each and every piece of your organization benefits from your organization, feeds and feeds off this is something that we think is critical, right? Where you're feeding off one another and you're continuing to grow because every piece of your organization is critical to your success. So when we as Faces offer development and training sessions surrounding diversity and inclusion, it's that thought that once your internal relationships improve, so does your product creation, your team output, and most importantly, your external relationships. So as you deliver better service and products to the community, their lives improve, right? So when we mentioned the Faces ecosystem, this is what we're talking about. The better you are internally, the better you execute externally, the better the community is, the more they continue to give to your business in this ecosystem. Right? So that's really what we believe. It's all interwoven. And it's that type of alignment that we ask our clients to seek, and the vision we have for ourselves when we enter into a space and we begin to talk about the importance of relationships and marketing. So how do our services reflect who we are, and how does our success of the business add to our well-being, as well as asking our questions like, how does our well-being, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, financial, contribute to the goals of the business and ultimately the community we live in, right? So we could easily operate from an imbalanced and detrimental place of exploitation and isolation, where we're just driving views and trying to get you folks looking at your items. But we think there's a larger responsibility in every company that we work with, and we continue to kind of press that notion forward through the marketing aspect, right?
Yeah.
So our vision again has always been to align ourselves with the work that we do and what we believe in at our core, which is relationships centered in community development and growth, and understanding through that our businesses are going to thrive.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Tyrone, and we'll get into this in a little bit in the later parts of the question. I thought it was interesting at the beginning when you and I first had our first conversation, that you said really the only difference between Tyrone Russell and Faces International is the LLC that's behind
Absolutely.
it. That it really becomes, the company is a function of who you are.
Absolutely.
And you need to make sure that that's ingrained within you and in your organization.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into how your businesses were impacted by the pandemic, and a reason I wanted to start with who you were as a company and the values is in order for us to behave ethically in our day-to-day activities and how we deal with our vendors, our customers, or even our employees, everybody within the organization needs to buy in. So the question I have for the audience, this is a poll question. So Dan, if you could get ready for the poll question. If we were to go inside your organization and ask the employees about the purpose and vision for your business, what percentage of your organization would know, understand, and embrace the purpose and vision? So this is not what you think, it's what your employees would say. Okay, well, as we go forward, Tom and Tyrone, just so you know, the audience said roughly 51 to 75% of their employees would know their vision. That's 41%. Greater than 75 is 39%, and 26 to 50 is 15%. So a good portion say at least half to 3/4 of their personnel understand their vision,
Mhm.
which is good to know. Because I think one of the reasons that it's so important for it to be ingrained within the organization, I love the analogy of the orange. You really don't know what's inside the orange until it's squeezed. And 2020 was definitely a year when everybody was squeezed and pressured to figure out what are you doing and where are you going. So as you listen to the rest of the conversation, the breakout session is we're going to be asking you to think about what's one thing that you've heard that you would like to take back to your company and why is it important. So as you listen to the rest of the dialogue and you think about what you just heard, just be sure to try to think about what's the impact to you and your company. So as we go forward, Tom and Tyrone, what I really want to get from you guys is the pandemic starts and you have to react. And you're two very different sides of organizations. What were some of the stresses on you as a leader? How did you guide your organization through the first few weeks and months following the first lockdown? And then how did you manage your organization to stay true to what you believe? Did you have any internal conflicts that you had to struggle with? Were there other issues that you had to deal with as you went through? So, Tyrone, I'm going to start with you. You're a smaller organization. I know when you and I talked, one of the things you said is, well, you had to pay bills too. So you had some initial conflicts. What were some of the things that you had to struggle with early on to stay true to your vision, and how did you do that?
Yeah, man, great question. Great question. Well, some of the early stresses for us were the immediate cancellation of in-person contact, which immediately impacted our contracts, right? Because a lot of our work before people were prepared for Zoom had to be done in person. So some of this work that we were doing in the development space, got cut off immediately. So you had this outlook, this visual of what the year was going to look like in terms of being able to pay those bills. And in a matter of 2 weeks, it was cut off. So we were forced to kind of ask ourselves, what do we do, right? We signed a few big ones early last year, January, and the year was looking good, and then March came, right? That was one of the major stresses that we were dealing with. So that fiscal sustainability and longevity of the organization was something that started to look grim. I think also the team morale, right? When fiscal suffers and contracts get clipped, so does folks' ability to believe in the future. So that doubt begins to seep in about whether or not we would make it to the other side. And that idea of alignment that I was talking about earlier starts to waver, right? So on and so forth. This work isn't feeding my family, although it's feeding my soul. So my balance is off. And then the existence of COVID and the political arena we were in, right? Is it a hoax? What are our leaders saying? What are they doing? And then you add the murder of George Floyd, and now as a firm led by Black men, right, in the middle of kind of the large Black Lives Matter movements and the protests across the world, our personal lives, beyond what the entire world was experiencing in terms of COVID, became impacted. So as a leader, we continue to think, how are we going to fix that, right? How as a leader do I understand the well-being of our team and the importance of it? Because as I said earlier, we're high on relationships. We think they drive every single thing that we all do on this call, even when we don't realize it. So part of dealing with those stresses was remembering how we built those relationships early on, and really leaning on the belief that we had as a team. Because as you said, we're a small business, and aside from a $14K loan that we received 6 years ago, we've never received money from anyone to do anything with our organization, right? So the idea of grinding, innovating, and pushing through hurdles was something we had a chance to practice for 9 years, right? We've experienced lockouts, as we like to call them, where people believe that we, again, as an African-American firm, can't market to large bodies of white population, right? So they always say, hey, you want to market to folks of color? We're like, yeah, and we want to market to the larger community. Well, we find another firm to do that. We don't know if you're it. So we've experienced lockouts that felt like the lockdowns, where our money was unstable and people didn't quite understand how our ecosystem worked. So part of the management came for me in dealing with the COVID situation started happening years ago when we were creating buy-in from our employees and our owners when we were getting locked out of particular rooms, right? And those who believed in that mission and vision, even through those rough times, stayed. So when COVID hit, we looked around and said, what's different for us here? What's different about what we're struggling with right now versus what we had to deal with in the past? And as far as business, nothing. but we were wondering if the world was ready for what we have been trying to offer for years. And if we didn't remain committed to those values of strong, authentic relationships and really believing in our clients and ourselves, we would have lost our team. So I wish I could say more about what the last year had done, but we have been doing so much, struggling for our first 9 years that when this showed up to our doorstep as a business, we said, okay, so, how is this different from what we dealt with in 2014 when we couldn't get a bank to give us any type of funding or line of credit to do the business that the business that we knew we could do. So
I appreciate that, Tyrone. I know that communication from our conversation was so key for you with your clients, with your personnel, just to make sure that they knew that you were willing to stick it out and be there for the longer term.
absolutely, absolutely. And I know we were talking, and I said we could easily cut corners, right? And earlier, start to exploit people's struggles, right? Like $10 gallons of gas that they were doing in Texas when they realized people were running low on gasoline. We could have easily begun to change our prices and what we're doing to chase that bottom line versus saying our relationships are important. And while our folks are struggling, we shouldn't exploit that pain. Instead, we should try to work with them through this and see what we get, on the other side, because marketing is all about those relationships with your clients, with your staff, with your team. That's marketing, right? So it's critical that we remained in that space.
I appreciate that, Tyrone. Tom, so you got a larger organization. You had an interesting story when we talked about how you kind of migrated through the first few months and then what you transitioned to later on. And one of the things that I'd like to understand from you as well, because you're in the IT arena, it could have been very tempting for you to try to capture extra revenue for companies who were desperate to be able to do technology and have people working remotely. So Tom, if you could kind of share a little bit about your journey as well.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you. One of the things I think it's important to understand, and for us, one of our core principles and our core tactics and strategies just around, how do you respond to changes in the market? And certainly we experienced just radical change overnight. It seems like it was what we all recall back. What made sense on a Monday seemed kind of silly by Tuesday morning, as we were constantly changing to the pace of change that was going on, throughout business. And one of the principles that I absolutely believe in, and I believe this if you're a 6-person organization or a 6,000 person organization, if you look at the way we operate, I don't believe in, and we don't believe in 1 and 3, 5-year business plans. I know that kind of sounds a little bit like heresy, but we are very much believer in real-time strategic planning. There's so much change going on, and we were very used to getting together as a leadership team, monthly to talk about what's changing, what are the threats, what's working and what's not. And while certainly time horizon is there over much more than a weekly, monthly, and you've got to look out, but it was changing so quickly even before the pandemic. That's how we had operated. So when the pandemic hit for us, we fell into what I like to call triage mode. And in the very early on, I'm sure like many of us, we were just trying to figure out, hey, can we survive in this new environment? Will our supply chains hold? Can I still get access to laptops and computers to be able to address growing aspects of our business? How are our clients going to respond? We had made the investments in technology years prior that it was pretty easy for us to go from a on-prem work in the office environment to overnight work remotely. The question is, would the market accept that? Would they view it as we were still being productive? We actually found that we were more productive working remotely. And I think many of us found that as we were when we were in the office. But that environment became really critical. And so we went to daily meetings, which we were just looking at everything from the tactical, can we ensure that we are surviving, to the larger and the strategic. And certainly for the first 30, 40, 60 days, it was much more just a tactical triage mode. What do we need to do to keep the patient alive? What do we need to address our clients? And for us, I'm sure like many of you, it varied, because in some respects, we were dealing with public sector agencies, state governments, industries that were doing well because technology was being leveraged. But then again, one of our largest clients was Royal Caribbean. And we all know what occurred in the entertainment and hospitality and the travel business. So the challenges that they felt and the cancellations of projects and so forth were very different. So we had a mix of all of those. And the challenge obviously was, as you might imagine, What are those things that we can do ethically? How do we want to respond to that? There are areas that we were getting phone calls just for desperate needs for help. And we did jump in and try and leverage technology for those companies that were trying to pivot to a pandemic-driven environment. Certainly, as you might imagine, we tried to do so ethically, and we tried to do so with good business practices. We weren't changing our pricing models or anything like that. But it was a mix of all the above. And Byron always kind of teases if this is somewhere you want to go. But the other aspect that we dealt with was, we're a technology company and we're a people company. So the technology, we were trying to pivot and change and determine what was needed industry to industry, and dealing with an explosion of projects in some areas as they were trying to figure out how to work in a digital environment, and cancellations of projects like the Royal Caribbeans of the world. But then for us, it really became down to, how do we ensure our culture? How do we keep our people engaged? How do we engage large groups of individuals in now a work from home environment? And that we spent a lot of time living in those two worlds, making sure we can, pay the bills, get access to technology, keep our supply chains intact. How do we ensure that we're meeting our commitments and leveraging and answering clients' problems that were technology based, they're looking for additional help? And then probably 50% of our time was just around our people and engagement, and what can we do to make them feel, still part of an organization and not isolated behind a video camera and a microphone and dealing in this digital world.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Tom, and we could probably spend hours talking about employee engagement and how to keep people focused on what they're doing. I think the key takeaway that I had from our conversation early on, and just from what you said, is how vital communication is to, whether it's to your vendors, whether it's to your clients, whether it's to your internal employees, making sure that they all understand what's going on and how you're going to react.
Absolutely. We did more forms, from emails to internal podcasts that we launched, to holding large Zoom sessions, et cetera. We did more in the last year than we probably did in the 3 years that preceded it, without a doubt.
So we're going to get into the breakout session now. So everybody who's in attendance is going to be put into a room. And what we want you to talk about is, from the discussion that you've heard, is there one thing that you've heard that you would like to take with you to implement in your company? And why is that vitally important for you? The why, I think, is probably even a greater importance than what the item is, because it has to be really why you're going to do it and how you're going to incorporate it into your business. So with that, Dan, can you send everybody to their breakout rooms? And we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Okay, well, welcome back. I'll give it another 30 seconds or so. I'll make sure everybody gets back here. Hopefully you had a great conversation within your breakout rooms. Business is always difficult. There's always complications as you're going through. And one of the interesting questions that came up in the group that I was in, and I'm going to ask Tom and Tyrone to weigh in on it, is there one individual or somebody who was wanting to get input from you, kind of calling you into, well, where are we going? What are we doing? And you had to take a step back and think about, okay, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? So Tom, why don't we start with you, and then we'll jump into you, Tyrone. And we've got about another 7 or 8 minutes, and I'll get a few other questions. But Tom, why don't you go first?
Sure, thank you, Byron. For us, I can't say there was one individual, but there were suggestions, questions, problems that were flying on a daily basis from our clients that were coming in saying, can you attest that if your people are going to come on our premises, that they're safe, and what are the premises of it? This is particularly early on. We had members of our leadership team that were just kind of, again, we encourage this on a daily basis, questioning, hey, are we getting this right? Because there was so much change going on so quickly. So we were getting that on a regular basis, and they were very real human, issues and problems where individual employees came out and say, I'm struggling with the following, I'm struggling with the care of an elderly parent, et cetera. Those things occurred. And I guess the message, which we all know, is, we need to be open to that. We need to be able to hear that. You need to be receptive to all those aspects. But I think that's a normal state of business, but it was just accentuated during the pandemic. So Absolutely. That voice, those perspectives were coming in daily. And again, particularly in the early on stages, I use that term, just triage. We were first managing triage, and it wasn't until probably about, I'd say 60 to 90 days in that we realized, okay, we've kind of stabilized. Now, in addition to just keeping the doors open, we do need to focus back on what are those strategic initiatives that we do need to make happen and breathe life into during the latter part of 2020. We need to focus on both the tactical as well as strategic. And we were constantly bouncing back and forth between the two.
Right.
Absolutely.
Rob, you had some interesting things to say.
Byron, can you just repeat that question for me quickly?
The question is, as you were going through the pandemic, what kind of dialogue were you having with either your employees or your clients, questions that they were raising to you that made you maybe take a step back, or what were they communicating to you with regards to your business? I think you mentioned 3 words in our breakout session, so I'd like to hear that as well.
Absolutely. So as a pandemic hit, as I was saying in the breakout session, there were 3 words that came across from our community members, and they were simply, we need you. We need you. Right? Faces International, we need you. And from there, we realized that we couldn't hide under a rock, right? We didn't have the ability to sit back and just allow the world to work, and then we figure it out when it was all over, right? We had to be at the forefront of helping people realize that there was hope and promise on the other side, from our marketing clients, the people that we develop marketing strategy for, to the community work and the development that we do with youth around the area, right? We were creating free COVID videos. We said, hey, we need to get this word out. How do we partner with a nonprofit and just create content to talk about the things that we need to do, during COVID? And CNN ended up coming to the Valley and covering that work with Promise Neighborhoods, Lehigh Valley, right? So we realized that we couldn't stand aside. We had to continue to show up as leaders because people were looking for folks who had vision, folks who had confidence, folks who were saying, follow me, we got this together. So, it just reminded us that we had a place, and we have a place and responsibility to continue to show up in this world and in the Valley in particular. So those voices continue to talk to us, right? Those are the folks who hold us accountable when we don't show up the way we said we were going to show up. They ask the tough questions, and they say, hey, you said you represent this, but this isn't quite, what I envisioned it looked like when you said you would do what you said you were going to do. So the accountability mechanisms are strong when you send a relationship and community around the work that you do, and they're not shy to call you out on it.
Tom, a question that I have for you. Some people may say, okay, you're a big company. You've got a lot of wherewithal, a lot of financial resources, so it's easier for you to stay true to what your vision is versus somebody, as Tyrone mentioned, I'm feeding my family, I've got to pay the bills. How do I do that when I've got a small company? How would you respond to somebody who would ask that question?
I would imagine that the struggles and the responsibility that both Tyrone and I have were very similar through this pandemic. And I share that from the following perspective. One of the areas that I mentioned earlier is, in the Royal Caribbean, in the cruise line, we had a project that we had over 75 individuals on that was canceled overnight. Now, 75 is a large number of people financially, but 75 is a large number of lives that are affected and families that those individuals were going home to, and some of the real world decisions and trade-offs that we had to make, trying to keep a balance between what's our purpose, what's right for employees, what's right for our customers. But that's a large problem to fix. And we had issues where we had 1 or 2 folks that we had to deal with. We had large scale issues. At the core, it's all the same relative to you're trying to act with compassion, you're trying to act ethically, and you're trying to respond with whatever is the best you can do given the available alternatives at hand. And I don't think the differences really were that significant. Those are real world, real people, the things that as business owners keep all of us up at night, the things that break our heart relative to having to make sometimes tough decisions, and doing everything we could to try and minimize that, use them elsewhere, et cetera. But the scale and the problems were, the scale was different. The problems and the challenges and the harsh realities of what we've all faced over the last 13 months, I think were very similar and very much the same.
I appreciate that, Tom, and I think it speaks well to both you and Tyrone. Your organizations are different sizes, but but the organizations are still dealing with the same issues. When you boil it down to its lowest common denominator, as business owners, business leaders, the biggest thing that we all can take to heart is, what is my personal vision? How do I want to impact the community? How do I want to impact my customers, my vendors, my employees? What's my interaction going to be? And difficult times may cause some different tensions to go on, but we never want to lose a sight of the fact that at the end of the day, it's about relationships and it's about people, and how we react is remembered far more than what we actually did. And the ethical behavior that we have shouldn't just be when times are good, it should be at all times. And that's really what should drive us as an organization. And if you're not driving in that basis, what's the long-term sustainability of your business?
Yeah.
So we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to ask Naomi if she wants to come back on. And I just want to leave you all with one thing. Think about an orange. Reflect back on 2020, when you were squeezed, when the issues that transpired early on in 2020 and your business was squeezed, you were under stress. What came out? Did the things come out that you wanted to, or as you reflect back, or the things that you would have liked to have done differently as you entered into the year? And as you go forward, the next time a crisis happens, how are you going to react? What's going to be your response? Are you going to react the way that you truly want to respond? What do you need to do from the company's standpoint to be able to enable you to react the way that you would like to be able to react? And if you look at yourself in the mirror, are you satisfied with what you did? And if there were mistakes that you made, it doesn't mean you can't go back and correct it or reflect on it differently, but just take the opportunity to learn something from what transpired. Learn something about your business, maybe learn something about yourself. Tom, Tyrone, I appreciate your time, your input, and your insights. And Naomi, I want to turn it over to you. Naomi Amadi.
Thank you.
I want to just thank everyone. Thank you all for taking the time to join us for such a reflective and a great conversation about purpose. Again, thank you to our 3 panelists for sharing your amazing journeys and your growth throughout your work experience, especially throughout this pandemic. So again, just thank you, everyone. Stay safe, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.